Right, so let's take this function and see if we can apply that same little trick. Now, if you don't like the trick and you just want to go through the whole process of swapping out x for y's and all that stuff, you can. I want you to be open-minded and be willing to learn a new way of doing something. No, Mr. Craig, I'm set in my ways. Tell me what you do with x. What's the first thing you do if you were to plug a value into this? And it multiply times what? Multiply times 10. Times 10, all right? If you're not careful, I'm going to turn this into one of those weird ASMR videos where I'm like, okay, so the next step, you got it. And no one's going to watch it. I thought math was creepy before. This is really weird. They just like put on some kind of Halloween special. What do you do next after you multiply times 10? You subtract 9, and after you're done subtracting 9, the last step you would take is what? You would divide by 17. So, let's go the other way. Let's go backwards. If I start with x, how do I undo this? Like, the last thing I did before I left this morning was that I divided by 17. So when I go home and I'm ready to relax and unwind, what's the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to multiply times 17. I'm going to go back to the way I was, and then I'm going to do what?
Add 9.
You're going to add 9 because that's the inverse of that operation, and then I'm going to do what?
Divide by 10.
I'm going to divide by 10. So now it's up to me to take these steps and write my inverse function. I'm starting with x, and what did I do with my x, the first step?
Multiply by 17.
So I'm going to write 17x, that indicates the multiplication, right? Then what?
Plus 9.
I add 9 to this.
And the whole quantity divided by 10.
Right, so each successive step is going to be applied to everything that came before it. Yeah, fist bump, right there. I don't know what I was fist bumping. It's weird. They're all staring at me. So what do you guys think about that? Too easy?
Yeah.
Did you just whisper that into the microphone?
So let's do another example. I think this last one was way too easy, right? And we all know that in a math class, math is never easy, right? If it ever seems to be easy, that's just because the math teacher is out to get you, right? And they've got another trick up their sleeve.
So was math ever easy for you?
Yeah?
Oh my gosh, Mr. Craig.
Math, there were times the math was easy. There were also times where math was difficult and I struggled. But I didn't quit. Anyway.
I saw like 4 people post on their Snapchat stories. I suck at that yesterday. And it made me think of these.
Yeah, because I told you, right?
Yeah.
Character trait.
You don't ever see people post like, man, I can't read at all. But if you can't do math, like they have groups for that. Not support groups, but like where you just like have fun. I'm assuming. I don't know.
There's
Yes.
a saying that pretty girls can't do math.
Well, my wife is a counterexample to that. So what do you do with x when you plug it in here? There are a lot of things going in, a lot of numbers.
Isn't there more than one instance of it? Isn't
I don't see x anywhere except here.
there? But it's going to be...
I only see x here.
Okay.
Oh, what, you want to expand that?
No,
Is that what you want to do?
But it means it could be expanded.
Right, but watch what happens here, and you're going to see the wisdom of what I'm trying to show you. You're right. I know. I appreciate that. I'm glad that the whole internet can hear that you think that I'm right. What's the first thing you're going to do when you plug in x?
Multiply by 2 inside of it.
You're going to multiply times 2, because, again, if you just give me a number.
3.
3. Okay, I heard 5 and 3, so if I were to plug in 53.
Oh.
Don't worry, I'm not actually going to do that. Come on. The first thing you do is multiply times 2, right? Would you then multiply times 5 next? No, what would you do?
Subtract.
You'd have to subtract 3 first because you follow the order of operations. Oh, that's my next step. Subtract 3. And then what would I do? I would then raise that whole guy to the third, whatever nastiness that number is, right? 103, I would then raise to the third power. And after I've raised that number to the third power, what would come next? Because we've got 5 and 7 left. Which one would happen next?
Multiply by 5.
You have to multiply times 5. I'm going to run out of room here. I'd multiply times 5, and then I would do what? Oh man, I ran out of room. I would then have to subtract 7. Do y'all agree? These are the steps that you have to take for your function, which means your inverse has to go the other direction, and it takes these guys one at a time and it undoes them. What's the inverse of minus 7?
Plus,
You'd have to add 7 first, and then what?
divide by
Divide by 5. How do you undo cubing something?
take a cube root.
You would take the cube root. Oh, that's going to be lovely. And then what?
Then you would add that.
Then you would add 3, and finally, divide by 2. You have 5 steps that you have to incorporate into your inverse function. So let's start with this x and see where we go from it. So I'm going to make sure I have x over here, so I have enough room. And what do I do with the x?
You would add 7.
Yes, so let me do it like this. Okay.
Divide by 5.
So the first thing is I'm going to add 7, and then the next step is to divide this expression by 5, right? The next step is to do what?
To the cube. Take the whole quantity to the cube root.
Put the whole thing inside of a cube root, understanding that it stops right here, right? What am I going to do to that cube root?
Add 3.
So I'm going to add 3 outside here, and then what?
Divide by 2. All over 2.
Divide the whole thing by 2. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what's up. You also could have done the longer process, and it would have worked out to be the same.